said we were going to look at 3 words in order to drill down into gratitude and how we can look at gratitude in a way that it becomes a discipline, where it's not just a feeling that kind of comes upon us when we end up feeling thankful for something, but we wanted to look at 3 words that would be principles that we could apply in our lives. And those 3 words were remember, respond, and rise. So these 3 words are 3 keys to gratitude. And what's difficult to hang on to things that we heard a week ago. So allow me to briefly respond or remind you of what we talked about last week. I mentioned that we often buy into a lie that we'll be grateful when our situation changes, right? Today we're not grateful because Christmas is upon us. How many of you are in that boat? Be honest, we'll love you anyways, all right? Oh, you guys are lying. All right, thank you, Jesse. There's a few of you that are like, I am not looking forward to this season, okay? And I understand that. There's so much pressure, there's so much junk in this season. But you look at your bank balance. How many of you would be a little more grateful if there was a little bit higher bank balance? Yes, okay, there we go. How many of you would be a little more grateful if your legs worked right? Yeah, okay. How many of you would be more grateful if you... Never mind. I was going to say if you had a different spouse, but I don't want to cause any fights just before Christmas. So that's just that. But you get what I'm trying to say, right? We believe that lie. I would be more grateful if this were different. And that lie, we believe that all over the place. We'll be grateful when our situation changes. Health, money, family, work, illness, injury, even our own habits. We wish we could change, and we'd be grateful when we can finally kick some habit. All of these things, they work against us. As good as they may be, your health is not always going to be stellar. Your family will go through rough patches. And even in a season of discipline, you'll eventually fall away from those discipline habits that really help you to grow. And while God asks us to be grateful, if we are not disciplined in being grateful, we fall into discontent and complaint. So, what we said last week is we fight back through remembering. We fight back by remembering God's faithfulness, whether that be through the Scriptures, through the testimony of your own life, through someone else's life. We need to remember the works of God and His faithfulness through them, to us through them. And what this does is it inspires hope. It inspires gratitude because of what a good God that would hold us, provide for us, guide us through every moment of our lives. And then we said that we needed to respond. So when we remember God's faithfulness over our lives, we need to respond to that faithfulness and that with gratitude. Gratitude for God's faithfulness moves us to be faithful to Him in return. I think one of the best ways that we can do that, and maybe preaching to the choir a little bit here, is by setting aside this time on Sunday morning when the saints gather, not only to be reminded of God's faithfulness at some point every single week, but to hear stories, to be able to be available for those who trust in you as their brother or sister in Christ, who lean on you, who need to know that you're still believing, right? Who need to be encouraged by the church. Because I'm going to tell you something, someone at this church is grateful for you. Someone at this church is grateful for you. They see God in you and they need you. And when you're not here, you cut off the witness of God's faithfulness. So when you regularly choose work or vacation or other events, or you're just in the habit of doing things on Saturday that prevent you from being present at this gathering, that is evidence that you are not grateful for God's faithfulness because the way God works in His church is through you. Not just through me, not just through the people that have volunteered. He works through every single one of you. And your unfaithfulness to that calling and to this local body of believers shows that what you believe to be important. There are plenty of other ways that we can respond, but this specifically is commanded in the Scriptures. Hebrews 10:25 says, let us not break the habit of meeting together regularly, like some are in the habit of doing. So we respond out of gratitude to be with and available to God's people. This is part of our grateful response, and it glorifies God. Gratitude for God's faithfulness moves us to be faithful in return. And when a group of believers operates in this way, it leads us to rise together. What do I mean by that? I mean, leave a legacy in our wake, something that lasts longer than this moment, something that outlives us, something that is impactful for the next generation, so that they too can be witnesses, maybe even better witnesses than we could have ever been, so that the world will know and proclaim the name of our King, our Redeemer, Jesus Christ. But before we get into rise, and talking about that in full, I want to take us back through, at least from my perspective, Rising's story. I want to take a few moments to remember God's faithfulness in this church. Many of you have come to us in the last few years, and you probably don't know all that's gone on for 13 years of existence, and it's not my habit to remember the good old days for the sake of remembering the good old days. I want to move forward. I want to see progress. I want to see God be glorified in whatever way, shape, or form that takes. But as I have been reflecting on gratitude and again, where the discussions our elders are having and just different things, I've just been looking back over the last 13 years and how many times I've wanted to quit. You know? No, that's any job, right? Have you ever gotten home on a Friday or a middle of the week and you're just like, I'm done, right? This is my job. So that's part of it, right? And but there's other part of it too, because there is amplified things that go on. So for those of you that have been with us from the very beginning, when we string these memories together of what God has done in our midst, man, it inspires gratitude, because several times, at least from my vantage point, other than wanting to quit at certain points in my 13 years here, there have been times where I thought the Rising was just going to close, you know? And I thought we were done. So just a quick backstory. Go with me down memory lane for a second. Again, from my vantage point, you may know all of these things, but it is important to string them together so that we can be grateful. Rising Church began in 2012, and we were the product of a church split. Okay, I'm not proud of that history, but the details at this point aren't important, at least in this platform. I don't want to share them with you, not because I don't want to be transparent, but just because it doesn't matter for where we're going. But I bring that up because this church started as a ragtag group of hurting people. I always tell people that if we were to choose to go to another church, with all the hurt that we held, it would have been to poison another church. It would have been to poison their worship and provide a far too enticing opportunity to gossip and speak poorly about our brothers and sisters in Christ who had hurt us. So we met in a park for worship, and we had a devotion. We had communion together. We had no money. We had no plan. We just had Jesus, and we met in a park that second week, and we grew a lot. We went from like 70 to 90. And of course, everybody at that point is like, we got something here. And I'm like, yeah, I think so. This is kind of cool. And we should organize. And I'm like, oh boy, that's going to be fun. And that the devotion that week, sermon, I guess, but more devotion was centered around this poem that I read in high school from a book called Red Moon Rising. And that poem was called The Vision. And it had impacted me so hard when I was a teenager. And I talked about how the vision needs to be Jesus, regardless of whether we organize, regardless of whether we disband and go to different churches, whatever the case may be, the vision needs to be Jesus. And we said it a couple of times there. And every Sunday since that second meeting for 13 years, we have said the vision is Jesus. So if you're new to us and you feel like we're a cult because we say that every week, it's actually a tradition. It's a centering point. It's not just something we say, it's something we believe, or at least I hope we believe, because I believe it. Our vision is to be Jesus in this world, following after him, following him together. And it was at that gathering that we did begin to organize. Now, there was no building, there was no money, and I was unbelievably inexperienced at any of this, but God was faithful. We found a place to rent. The money came in that we needed to purchase equipment. This keyboard has been with us for 13 years. There are plenty of things that we figured out. We put these plans together. There were people with all kinds of experience, whether that be folks who had served on church boards before or former pastors that were wanting to help guide, and we got going. And I was selected at 24 years old to be the pastor of this church. I don't know what y'all were thinking back in that day. I was the only one, yeah. Things got out. People got excited. People started inviting friends. We tried our best to do what we could. We set our attendance record on Easter. I don't know, first or second year, I think. I can't remember. I didn't even look that up. But it was 199. We couldn't break 200. You know, like that's always been a sticking point. We've never broken 200. But 199 is even incredible to think about where we are today, right? Our attendance record stands as 100. And it felt insane. But my lack of experience in our ragtag group, the nature of that group would catch up with us. We quickly established a board of elders. My upbringing in a seeker-sensitive church would influence me in different decisions, and we were all kind of the leadership of the church was all kind of heading in different directions about how to form the culture of this church. And unfortunately, the eldership did fracture. Kind of like politics, right? Like everybody just kind of picks a side or picks their own side and advocates for what they think should happen. And then a secret meeting of men at the church was called by one elder, an effort to relieve me of my duties, and tempers flared. I offered my resignation, but they preferred to fire me. No joke, that was the case. All three elders ended up leaving the church. One of the former pastors had left the church already by that point and emailed me after he found out that all of the elders had left the church and basically called me a failure because all of the leaders of the church had left. One of the elders called me afterward. I was trying to mend the fences, and he told me that my sermons were psychobabble. And that lived in my head for years. Not only did I feel like a failure and a letdown, I pretty much assumed my days in ministry were done, that I wasn't cut out for this. I'm in my mid-20s. I don't have a college degree. I wasn't trained for this. I've been figuring it out as we've gone along, and it was hard. But God was faithful. Two men pulled up by my side. Randy and Craig. They encouraged my soul, and they began to help me put the pieces of this broken church back together. We established a steering team to guide the church, and we began rebuilding. We ran into more issues over those next couple of years. They don't deserve a place in this high-level flyover, but they tested our response to sin with truth and grace. And you know what? Grace is offensive to some people. I don't know if you realize that. But through those things, we continued to bleed as a church. God was faithful. Financially, we were strong, but we were paying, I think I have the number right, I did not go back and check, but we were paying nearly $4,000 a month to rent the facilities that we were in. And we found, in 2016, we found this building for sale. The Refuge had been using it, and they were moving over to what was formerly New Hope. And we found this, and we got excited about it. In fact, Ken and I think it was just Ken. I don't know. Maybe Dawn, too. They were like, that's too small. And then we came in, and it was like this room was a little darker in the paint scheme. The chairs were not as comfortable. But it was ready-made church. We could bring our equipment in, and in a couple of weeks, we'd be ready to fly. And so we started pursuing. A couple of people put their names down to co-sign on the loan because we had zero credit. The bank told us we had to raise 33% of the down payment. And through a large donation, through your faithful giving, through all of those things, we made it happen. And we've been here since 2016. It was so exciting. There was every week, some of you in the early days, you know this, but every single week we had to get to the building at like 7:30, 7 o'clock. I can't remember the exact time. I'm so glad I can't remember the exact time. But we had to get everything out of a closet that was about this big. We had to jam all of our equipment in there after every Sunday, and then every Sunday pull all that equipment back out and get it all set up, get it ready to go, and hopefully pray that there were no technical difficulties in the meantime. But we had no more set up, tear down, no more being this portable church that had to look as if we never met following Sunday morning. We had so much excitement over this. And no joke, those 3 weeks that spanned from the time that we closed on this building and got the keys to our first meeting, Satan attacked. I came under fire. My marriage started falling apart. I didn't get to enjoy that win, that celebration, because my home life was a wreck at that point. There was counseling, there was hard conversations, there were facing realities that I didn't want to be true, and then the reality of a divorce just a couple months later. I grew up, you need to understand this, I grew up believing that a divorced person could not pastor or lead a church in any way. And I confessed to our steering team what was going on, and I was being as accountable as I could to them about what was going on. I tendered my resignation again and again. I think 3 times. I don't remember the exact number, but if it was multiple times. Like, I am willing to step down if it doesn't kill Rising Church. Like, I don't believe that I am qualified anymore to lead a church. And each time they didn't accept. And this produced a huge battle in me because I was in counseling, I was in communication with 2 other pastors, and I had deep conversations about this issue with them. And they all told me the same thing. They all said, for your specific situation, we don't believe that you need to step down. So when I confessed to you all this sin of divorce, and that's exactly what it is sin, God was faithful. In what stands as a top 5 moment in my life, you all surrounded me in prayer. Right there. You got up out of your seat, you laid hands on me, you supported me. And some people did leave our community after that. But by and large, we moved forward, and we even started building momentum. 2017 and 19 were some really good years. We started outreach, we ran VBS, we did some great ministry, we had a whole system that we were trying to learn and adopt. We had about 15 people that were meeting regularly to learn how to reach out to our community and do some wonderful things. And even me being single and losing some weight attracted some new guests to our church too, which was, they all left once Christine came into the picture, which isn't entirely a bad thing. But as you all know, the worldwide pandemic hit, right? Fully online, figuring out how to navigate an outraged world with temperance and faith. We survived, but everyone was fatigued. Giving dropped off, and I got to be honest with you, there was a year following that I thought that this wouldn't be my full-time job anymore. And that we could quite possibly close. Anyone on the steering team at that time, if you talk to them, we went home so discouraged so many times. And Christine and I started talking about what are we going to do. I was talking with Jeremy from Owasso about what what are the options here? Do you have any advice? And he's like, I ain't got nothing. But can you guess what I'm going to say? God was faithful. The finance team went to work. Steering team went to work. We restructured our budget. We cut everywhere we possibly could. Missions, programs, even our snacks. Everything got cut as far as it could. And we started the pledge campaign about 3 years ago. And not only has God been faithful, you have been faithful. Because today, we sit with the highest bank balance that this church has ever had. For the last 2 months, we've had guests joining us. New every single week. Last week, Dawn was counting. They were out of town for 2 weeks, and she's looking around. She's like, I counted 7 people that I didn't recognize today. Some of them are not here today, so maybe I scared them off with, you need to be in church last week, but oh well. No advertising. We don't post regularly on Facebook other than the sermons. We don't push anything out there, but the Lord has been bringing people to us. We're just doing our thing, being faithful as God has been faithful, trying to walk where the Spirit leads us in generosity and faithfulness and Scripture and all of those things. And that is a very high level view. Randy told me, he said, you could write a book with all the things that you have had to face as a first decade preacher. But it is good for us to remember these things. If we had more hours, I could tell you so many more stories about how God has been faithful in our midst. I could tell you about Angel, who came to our church and because someone invited her, and she was a victim of Fatah. Yes, Dr. Fatah. I was going to say Fauci, and I was like, that's not right. But Dr. Fatah, he was actually charged with malpractice because he was giving people treatments that they didn't need. He killed people.
He didn't care. They were infidels.
Mm-hmm.
He said that.
Mm-hmm. And Angel was one of those victims. But we had the privilege of baptizing her in this church and walking alongside of her and being there and hosting a memorial service at in North Branch, or Columbia. Well, yeah, I guess it's technically North Branch. That was a rough night. There were a couple of fist fights and different things going on because you're doing ministry to people that don't know Jesus, and that happens, So many stories, so many things that we could talk about, but that's where we've been, and it might not be as meaningful to you as it is to me, because I lived it, some of you didn't, and some of you were none the wiser as things were going on. But our little church has faced more dark valleys in just over a decade than most churches face in half a century. Whether that's been self-inflicted, which admittedly there are some things that we've done that have been self-inflicted, or it's been purely an attack of the enemy, that doesn't really matter at this point. What matters is that God has ordained, at least for the present, that Rising Church would live up to its namesake. Where we have been knocked flat on the ground, the Lord has lifted us up, and we're going to keep pressing on. We're going to rise. And for that, I don't know about you, but I am so grateful to serve this church, to have 13 years of grace from you, where the sermons have been long, right? But where we've tried to throw things at the wall, where we've been nimble, where we've been able to experiment, where we've been able to try. And I am so grateful for you that have responded out of faithfulness to God, with your dollars, with your time, with your encouragement, with your hugs, with your smiles, with your presence. It's been a beautiful thing. And I want to read out of 2 Corinthians 9. And again, I don't want to lift this up out of context or make it mean anything that it doesn't mean, because Paul is speaking specifically to a certain people at a certain time for a specific reason. But I think we can pull out some things from this text that apply to us today. Starting with verse 10, he says, "Now the one who provides seed for the sower and bread for the food," who is that? Who is the who in that verse? It's God. The one who provides seed for the sower and bread for food will also provide and multiply your seed and increase the harvest of your righteousness. You will be enriched in every way for all generosity, which produces thanksgiving to God through us. For the ministry of this service is not only supplying the needs of the saints, but is also overflowing in many expressions of thanks to God. Because of the proof provided by this ministry, they will glorify God for your obedient confession of the gospel of Christ and for your generosity in sharing with them and with everyone. And as they pray on your behalf, they will have deep affection for you because of the surpassing grace of God in you. Thanks be to God for this indescribable gift. Obviously, Paul is speaking to a particular situation in the Corinthian church, but the same thing I think can be said about Rising Church, that God has provided us with seeds to sow and bread to eat. And He is always, in lean times and in times of excess, He has always sought to multiply His harvest through our righteousness. Church, as we head into Thanksgiving, we need to be thinking about this. We have been enriched in every way for all generosity. And what does generosity do according to what Paul says? Generosity produces thanksgiving to God. That's why we give. That's why we've started this program to help our church have a good Christmas. That's why we give the toys. That's why there's food on the back table. That's why we have church even every week, is that our generosity with our time, with our talents, with our treasures, it produces thanksgiving to God in other people. It is a witness to other people. And he says there will be proof of in this ministry that people will glorify God for our obedient confession of the gospel and as a result of your generosity fueled by gratitude. And our relationships will become stronger because love is going to grow. Affection will grow because of God's grace in us. This is all a picture of gratitude rising, not just in us, but in our fellow brothers and sisters. Overflowing into the community around us of those that are not yet brothers and sisters in our world. And so this isn't just nice talk. This isn't just preacher talk. What I'm trying to tell you is that gratitude is the foundation. Gratitude is the foundation of our faith. We can be grateful for our church. We can be grateful for folks who have mentored us in the faith. We can be grateful for Christian music and worship songs. We can even be grateful for the Bible and the cross. But all of those things, and I'm going to say this, it might be offensive, but even the cross are things that point us back to the immeasurable, indescribable God that we serve. The cross is a symbol of God. Yes, we're grateful for the cross, but we're more grateful for the God that's behind the cross. Amen? Amen. We're more grateful that He sent His Son, one and only Son, to come to this world because He loved us. That whoever would believe in Him would not perish but have everlasting life. We are grateful that this is the God that we serve, the God of good gifts, the God who does teach us and puts us under discipline from time to time so that we might grow into the image that He created us to be. And out of that gratitude comes generosity because we deserved none of it. And so we're more willing to give to those who deserve none of our generosity. That's what makes us concerned for one another in this room. If it were not for Rising Church, I don't think I would know most of you. Is that true for you? It does bring us together. If it were not for God, and it's because of that gratitude that we have for God, it makes us concerned that when I look out there every single Sunday and I see people walking up and down their porches, I silently pray to myself that, man, if they don't Obviously, they're not in church on Sunday morning. It doesn't mean that they don't believe in Jesus, but probably they don't believe in Jesus, right? And we're right here. It makes me concerned. The gratitude that I have for God's generosity in my life makes me want to be generous to them. Even our neighbor lady that I got into a fight with a couple of months ago, all right? What was that? Shouldn't, no, shouldn't. No, I didn't. Probably should do that, huh? Thanks for the conviction this morning. Yeah. Yeah. So gratitude grows where we remember God's faithfulness, where we respond to God's faithfulness. And gratitude grows when we rise in God's faithfulness. When we look forward to the future and think about how our response will fuel others to be grateful for God's faithfulness. Most of us, and I'm just going to say this, it's general. You may not feel you are this way, but I just want you to consider it for a minute. Most of us think about church or think about the Bible or think about the prayer as far as what I need to be doing and what I need to do in order to be in favor with God and with our church and with other people. When we force ourselves to remember God's generosity, He was thinking forward, wasn't He? The Old Testament, when you read through the Old Testament, it may not be as authoritative over our lives as it was for the Jews, but the Old Testament talks about Jesus all over the place. God had this plan. From Genesis 3 on, He had this plan to send His one and only Son so that we could be redeemed, so that we could have a king that was timeless, that was eternal, and had our best interests in mind. God was future thinking, and so it stands to reason that we need to be future thinking in our gratitude as well, and we need to rise into that. Church on Sunday morning it is a meal. It's like having dinner. Do you remember what you had for dinner on Tuesday night? No, we don't. I can't remember what we had for dinner on Tuesday night. All right? You can't remember a sermon that I preached 4 weeks ago, even if you were here and you sat under it. This is like a meal, right? We feast on it. We feast on the love we have with one another. We go together in this. But we need to have a future goal in mind too. Because as we think in the present, we lose our gratefulness. What happens when you open up social media and start scrolling? You see an ad for something that you don't have. You see another life of someone that has it better than you, right? You see a politician that you're like, I wish you weren't in office, right? You get discontent, you complain, you start not being grateful, and you start believing the lie. We go back to the lie, and we say, man, I will be grateful when things change. Not what the Bible says. We need to be forward thinking. Our gratitude needs to carry us into the future. And so I want to share with you from a church-wide perspective where we're headed because of God's faithfulness to us. Where can we go now that we are blessed with some financial means and that we are stable and that we are in this place? We've been talking about a lot of things. And so the first thing I want to talk about is just simply membership. Because one, I need to tell you about this, and there's no good time to tell you about this, all right? But it is a pivotal thing. When Christina and I started talking seriously about having a lease, the Lord had really impressed on me at that time. Our steering team was burnt out. They were tired. And I have known for years that the biblical model for church is elders to lead our church. And it was just one of those things that it was like, man, we've got to establish this at some point, but I'm not even sure how to go about this. And there's always issues when you go through a change in leadership. But the Lord pressed it on me because He knew I was going to need help because now part of my time needs to be devoted to a child, right? And so we took that step, a year of monthly meetings, talking about what it looked like. And the day that we installed Bob, Chuck, and Carl as elders, I found out why that coincided, because that day that they were ordained, as it were, Christine had taken a pregnancy test before church that morning and found out she was pregnant. And so we got home, and it was a reason for worship, because we were like, okay, God was leading us in a particular direction, and now that we have this in place. But one of the very first things that we've done is taken up a statement of faith for our church. We haven't had a statement of faith for our church for the longest, forever, because I didn't feel comfortable setting forth a statement of faith without elders. I didn't think it should be my statement of faith. It needed to be a collective discussion about what this church is going to believe. We read a really thick book on all the denominations, the prominent denominations in the United States. We sometimes bored out of our minds reading that book, but we wanted to be informed about all denominations and what they believed and be exposed to the way other people believed. We use that to sharpen ourselves and drill down to what we believe. And so we're presenting that to you today. It's on our website. It's on the back table, and I need to explain it a little bit. On the front side is what we believe it takes to be a Christian. Those are kind of our non-negotiable beliefs. So that is our official statement of faith at this time. On the back side of it is what we've called convictions. These are things that we think that Christians can disagree about. How many of you have ever met a Christian that you disagree with what they believe about Jesus? Yeah, absolutely. So because people want to know where we stand on those things, we had discussions, we looked at it, we tried to understand what those topics were. And so on the backside are the things that we think we can disagree about, but we have our positions as far as how I'm going to teach, how the elders are going to shepherd you in, and all that. If this can be divisive, okay, we're not going to let it be. If you disagree with something that's on the conviction side of that paper, please come have a conversation with us. I promise you there's really good reason why we believe that way. If you have a question about something on the front side of that, please come talk to us. Maybe we have put some confusing language in there that we can do better and refine, because I think it's pretty boilerplate, pretty standard stuff as far as what they believe. But you should know this, especially if you're a member of the church, as far as where we stand. The second thing that the elders have taken up is our membership process. First, what is a member of the church? What's the point of being a member? Is it biblical? Yes, membership is biblical. I'm just going to point blank. One example is found out in Hebrews 13:17. Hebrews 13:17 says, "Obey your leaders and submit to them, since they keep watch over your souls as those who will give an account, so that they can do this with joy and not with grief, for that would be unprofitable to you." This text implies that there are specific church leaders that you are to submit to. And there are specific people the church leaders are responsible for and will give an account for. Think about that. When we get to heaven as church leaders, not only are we going to be judged on our conduct, but we're going to be judged on how well we took care of you. Like, I'm in trouble. You know? That's just the way. So this is a responsibility that we knowingly take on. So the question that I always ask people when I'm presented with the fact is membership biblical, I bring up that verse because if it weren't for you, I wrote that wrong. The idea is this. It says, obey your leaders. Does that mean that you have to obey every preacher that has ever walked the face of the earth? No. Does that mean you have to, the preachers in Lapeer County, do you got to submit to those leaders? No. That's not Paul's intent in this verse. And leaders have a responsibility for every Christian? No. Man, if I was responsible for every Christian in this world, I'd quit. You know, I don't want to be responsible for every Christian. There's no way I could have all the time to do that. This verse very clearly communicates that there are leaders, local level leaders. It's a delegation idea. There are people that you are to submit to as church. We submit to our leaders, and our leaders are accountable specifically for our local bodies. And so membership is absolutely biblical. It's not the only verse, but it was the easiest one to explain in a short amount of time. But membership is ultimately a covenant. The elders here agree to shepherd you, which includes caring for you, checking in on you, holding you accountable if you are a member of this church. If you have not made that step into membership, they don't step in when they see something going on. They're not going to check on you. You're free to come and worship. You're free to be here, but that's not the thrust of what elders are here for. They're here for those that have made a commitment because they're making that covenant too, saying, I'm going to support this local body. So, in addition, being a member lets this church body of members know that you are committed to this body. To help, to serve, to be helped, to be served. It's a commitment that current members make to you and that you make to them. So, as we looked at membership, we decided that we needed to change a few things. Historically, we'd put you through a long class where I talk a lot. Usually on a Sunday afternoon where you're tired of hearing me talk. All right? So, here's a high-level overview of the process. If you have questions, talk to the elders, talk to me. Okay? We'll figure it out, but I don't want to take too much more time on this. First, we're asking you to fill out an application. There's some applications on the back table back there. You're more than welcome to take one. It's exciting. I know. That's super. But it gives our elders some background knowledge in order to get to know you, because the second step will be an elder interview. That sounds dangerous and like you're going to the principal's office. I promise you it's not. Have you met our 3 elders? They're wonderful guys. They're responsible for shepherding you, so they want to know where you struggle. They want to know where you are strong. But they also want to protect this church. So, if there's ever a situation where someone is looking to take advantage of this body and pursue their own agenda, they're the first line of defense. They're able to weed out maybe wolves in sheep's clothing. Then, since current members are kind of a change at this point, not really, but more, we're going to emphasize this more. Since current members are accountable to and for these new members, we're going to take time every other month to present these new members to you. We'll introduce them, and then we're going to ask current members of Rising Church to affirm their commitment of love, of care, and of accountability to you. This serves as a second line of protection for our church too. So what is practically going to happen is we're going to have somebody come up, whoever is new members, we're going to say, hey, this is so-and-so. They want to be a member of this church. They've had their elder interview. We've learned a lot about them. Here's a fun fact about them. Maybe even let them give an introduction real quick if they don't talk as much as I do. And then we're going to send them out of the room. And we're going to say, members of this church, by a hand vote. It's not a vote. I shouldn't use that word. It's an affirmation. But by hand raising, do you affirm that you will welcome this person into the church? And that second line of defense is if that person has lied to our elders, if this person has had a facade and you've seen them out in the world and they really have maybe some agenda or something that they want to do, they want to infect our church, I guess you could say. The elders and I have a responsibility to protect you. And so this gives us a second line of defense to help make sure that this church doesn't become corrupted, I guess you could say. We want to protect you. But then we're going to do some vows, kind of like a wedding. We're going to have this covenant form. We're going to ask them some questions. We're going to ask you some questions. And we don't really see any issue with it going forward other than new members are going to be a little nervous, right? But it serves a great purpose in the fact that you guys see them and know that they are new members. And then following that church service, we're going to have a potluck dinner as a good old love feast. Everybody's excited about food. I saw a couple of eyes light up. We're going to have a potluck dinner. And those new members, inaugurated on that day, I guess you could say, are going to be our guests of honor. And we're going to spend time together. We're going to encourage you to get to know them. Maybe we'll play a silly game with them real quick, just a get to know you game. And just enjoy being a community together and the fact that God is growing us. So I really think this is going to be a beautiful way that we make membership more sacred in our community and also do a better job of integrating new members into our community. Beyond that, new members, you get assigned an elder. Someone that is going to be keeping track of you specifically. It doesn't mean all the elders aren't available to you, but you'll have one contact person that if you have an issue, you can contact them. And they'll be ready to help shepherd you, help serve you in whatever way, answer any questions. So membership is taking a different turn. It's not really different in function. We just want to emphasize it more because the church is what? People. It's not an organization. It's not a building. It's about relationships. Because Jesus came to this earth to form relationships. And as we come together, both in protecting this church and celebrating what God is doing in the midst of this church, it increases our gratitude. We get to be together more, celebrate what God is doing in our midst, hear testimonies of how people have come to faith. I think it's going to be a wonderful addition. But that's not the stuff I'm most excited about. Now that I've completely bored you with all of these things, I'm excited about this stuff. I don't know about you. We're turning the page on faithfulness. This church has been in survival mode, as I recounted a little bit earlier. And through the pledge campaign, through your faithfulness, through God's faithfulness to us, we feel like it's time to make a move. Not a physical move. I hope someday. But over the last year and a half, God has brought us several families. You guys have seen them, right? Different families. Do you see them here today? No. And I'm talking families with kids, right? They come in, and all of the elders, including myself, have had conversations with people about what are you looking for in a church? How can we answer any questions that you have? You know what one of the first questions with families with kids say? What do you have for the kids? Now, we have had faithful volunteers. We have burnt more people out in kids ministry than anything over the last 13 years. And this is not to take anything away from them, but we just have not been able to build momentum. We have not. And we're not seeing these families come back. So like I said, every elder has had this kind of conversation. I know many of you have expressed to me that you would like to see more kids in our church. Is that true? Okay, be honest. Don't just tell me, tell the church, all right? Be honest about that. We would love to see more of that. No. We're going to need a pay raise if we're going to build the whole youth ministry for that. But here's the thing. We've had faithful conversations about this. We talked about, we have had a long-standing desire to rebuild our ramp and put it out front. So as we saw the bank balance rising up, we got a quote. Do you know how much it was going to take to put out a ramp out front that was going to be up to code and everything? $32,000 to build a ramp out front. Have it all done. Pull permits, do all that kind of stuff. And so we sat down in the elders meeting a couple months ago and we discussed that and we just all looked at each other like, no, we can't do that. Can't do that. Not right now anyways. But what can we do? After much prayer and years of prayer on my behalf, but a lot of prayer in the eldership and different things like that, with an incredible amount of nervous joy, I am so excited to officially announce to you that we are beginning a search for a children's ministry director. Specifically for kids ministry. This is not going to be a joint position. This is not going to be anything. They are going to focus on our K through 6th kids and start building a ministry that when families come in here, we will be able to keep them, okay? Now, a couple of caveats on that, just so you have full information. This is coming purely from savings. I forgot to announce today, but we have our budget out for next year that we have to take a vote on next month. So you need to take a look at that and be ready to yay or nay that. But this is not coming from our standard budget. This is purely from savings at this point. Okay? And we've decided at this point that we are able to pay this person $15 an hour for 15 hours a week. So keep in mind what that means. That means we're not going to attract someone that is from Great Lakes Christian College, fresh out of ministry, to move to Lapeer for $15 an hour at 15 hours a week, right? We don't have the funds to pay a full-time person at this point. There's taxes, there's all the other things that come with it. They need to have a budget to work with. So all of this is coming from savings. If you want to sweeten the pot and you're waiting for an opportunity like this, we would gladly take donations towards it. But this opportunity is because of God's faithfulness to us, your faithfulness to Rising Church. And I would be remiss to say this, other specific givers that have given out of like estates when their parents pass away and they get some money, they give it to the church, tithe on it basically. We've gotten several big donations based on that. And so we have had opportunity now to say, God, where can we be faithful with what you have given to us? And so this is going to be on a 1-year contract. We're going to offer this for a year. We'll commit to pay for a year. And it is going to be their goal. This person has to be driven. This person has to be thinking forward. This person has to be ready to go with some ideas and have a little bit of a passion for this. Because as we build this and as we see more families come into the church, this is the business side of church. It's not real fun to talk about it, but we'll see more money come into the church, right? That will create room in our budget so that we can bring them on longer than this first year. Why do I bring this up? Because this is an opportunity. Guys, legit, I've been praying for this for years. I started in youth ministry, teens specifically. I know what Paul and Jaden are doing downstairs and trying to get a bunch of teenagers that do this all through class to be engaged about the gospel. I know that you want to see kids in the church. I want to see a kids' Christmas program again, don't you? Yeah, that would be great. I need you to pray. I have no idea who this person is going to be. All I know is that God has given us the funds. He's given us the space. He's given us the longevity to be able to move forward into the future. And we need this person to focus on a ministry to our kids, not because it's the best thing that glorifies Jesus. I would rather take that money and give it away, right? Because I think that would be a beautiful example of that. But for this church to go into the future, we need to be raising up the next generation too. It's been a long time coming that we've needed this. And no, before somebody says that, it's not because of my daughter. It's not. Anybody that knows me has known that this is something that I have really wanted to see happen for a long time. This is an opportunity to pray first and foremost. Pray that prayer of God, you've done it before. Do it again. Do it again. But it's not from the place of feeling successful as a church body. We can fall into that pride really quickly. Say, hey, we're moving forward. Things are on the up, all that stuff. But that's not where we're coming from. There's no room for pride in this. It's from the place of gratitude. Some seasons are for mourning. Some seasons are for dancing. Looking back at the story that God has written through Rising Church, we can be grateful. I especially can be grateful. We can remember God's faithfulness. It's because of this church that we know one another. God has purposed that we would be in one another's lives. We can respond to that faithfulness by being faithful in response. Being present and available to one another in this local body, stepping up and saying, I want to commit and become a member. I want to be part of this family that's striving to be the vision of Jesus in our own hearts, in our homes, and in our neighborhoods. And we can rise together in the work of ministry with expectation that because of God's past faithfulness, we know and we expect that He will be faithful going into the future. We can be grateful for that future faithfulness today. And this is how we ground our worship in gratitude. This is how we ground our lives in gratitude. This is how we begin the next chapter and leave a legacy, a generation that when you've been gone for years, when you've been with Jesus for years, a young child in this church is grateful for you, for your faithfulness. Not just in your giving and your service, but in you. Because you looked at the kids that were running around this church, took an interest in them, and said, God has given me an opportunity to invest in the next generation of faith moving forward. We can decry the fact that Christianity is shrinking in America. We can decry the state of our churches. We can decry all of those things. What are we going to do about it? Right? We're going to look at these kids and we're going to invest in them. We're going to reorient our ministry a little bit around them. We're going to get these families that are far from Jesus to be near Jesus. How? Through gratefulness of God's faithfulness and being faithful to them. That is how we're going to accomplish this. Far into the future, Christians, saints who are young today that even have yet to be born will say, I glorify God today because of the believers at Rising Church. Because of the obedient confession of the gospel of Jesus Christ and their generosity that streams from Jesus. That because of God's faithfulness, they were faithful. And today, because of them, I know God's faithfulness for myself. Church gratitude is not just a feeling, it's a discipline that ripples with change across generations. So let's take time to remember, let's respond, and let's rise together expecting God to be faithful. What can you do this week? Remember, respond, rise. Remember God's faithfulness in your life and in this church's life. That's why I told you the story. If you love Rising Church, that story may not mean a whole lot to you, but please know we have the battle wounds of God's faithfulness. Respond. Just because God has rescued us once doesn't mean He will always into the future. If we become apathetic, if we become ungrateful, if we become self-centered in that process and saying, we're awesome, man, I remember from history class that Rome collapsed while people were partying, eating, and drinking. We can't get complacent. We can't stop and enjoy the moment. We need to be thinking about what's coming forward. We need to respond. And then we need to rise up into that. This church, I often say that I never wanted the church to be named Rising, but I'm so glad it did because we have been like a phoenix rising from the ashes so many dang times, right? And because of that, we have a testimony together. Whether you've been here 1 week or you've been here for 13 years, evidence of God's faithfulness is all around us. Please pray for our church, for the individuals of our church, especially going into Christmas. Please pray for this unknown person that we're hopefully going to be bringing on staff within the next 6 months to work in our kids' ministry. Please pray for our leaders As I detailed when we bought this church, as we moved forward one time, I came under significant attack. And I'm bracing for impact again. Please pray for us. And if there's a problem, deal with it. Do not let division grow in this church. That will stop everything that God has been faithful for in its tracks. Especially going into Thanksgiving, please remember where God has been faithful in your life and worship Him because of it.